All right, looks like we're live. We're doing an early morning stream today. Probably not going to be super long. I would guess less than an hour. But anyway, let me get started with my normal intro. I'm a software engineer. I've been coding professionally for the last 8 years, coding in general for the last 10 to 12. And recently, I have been documenting my journey in game development, learning game development, specifically in the Godot open source game engine. I've been documenting it by streaming, and it's been a really fun experience, really good time. And yeah, a lot of good people have joined and hopped in and left comments and messages and asked questions, and I'm here to just hang out, answer questions about that people have about software engineering, and just make some games. So I haven't really been making a game per se. It's more of a playground for learning about game development, building game features, possibly working on some features that I might implement in a future game. But I like to start out usually with walking through kind of what I've built so far. As we can see, it boots up to a main menu. You can continue, create a new game, load a game. Within the load system, you can choose a save file, delete it, load it, whatnot. If we start a new game here, we come and see a 2D top-down view of a player that you control with your keyboard and mouse. The triangle polygon is the outline of or the hitbox for a flashlight. So when I press F, the flashlight turns on. And these blue polygons are zombies. And when you shine your flashlight over them, they appear. And then when you move it off, they disappear. You can shoot the zombies, they'd fall over. There's a player inventory system that I've been working on recently, which is part of what we're going to work on today. I started putting together a dual inventory menu where you can, you'll eventually be able to drag and drop in between inventories and whatnot. And if we zoom out here, just with a debug command, you can see that I've built a chunking system. It is a 3x3 grid around the player. There's a save system that saves and loads the zombies. Needs to be expanded to inventory and other things. But yeah, that's basically the core of the things that I've built so far. Over the last week of streams, I've been working on learning more about UI and how control nodes work and all the different UI elements within Godot work. It's been definitely a journey. It's not like JavaScript, TypeScript, React, which I use a lot. But I'm learning it. And where we left off on the last stream was I was trying to figure out how I can implement draggable elements in Godot. And I was pretty close towards the end. I was working on kind of these 4 functions here. I don't think GUI input's actually going to be necessary, but in particular, these 3 functions, can drop data, and get drag data. These seem to be the 3 main functions related to drag and drop. And you implement each of these for a different reason. Can drop data basically says, can you can something be dragged and dropped into this location? Drop data tells you what data is being dropped, and then get drag data tells you the information about what's being dragged. So off stream, I spent like 5 minutes just to kind of figure out why this wasn't working, and I realized that we were pretty close. So if I go back a few steps here, so this is where we ended the last stream. As I was digging more into set drag preview, I realized that the preview that you're setting here, I was setting it to self because I was hoping that you could just like drag the whole element and it would appear. But it turns out that set drag preview doesn't allow you to use a scene that is currently on the scene tree, so it has to be new. So I basically, just for testing purposes, created an action button, which all of these inventory elements are action buttons, and set that to the drag preview, and I don't know, actually I'm realizing I don't understand what the return value of this is supposed to be. Return, so your custom method generating the drag data. Okay, so I think what we pass back from get drag data is what possibly gets returned as data in drop data. So that's something we'll figure out at some point here. I will delete that because it's just printing out a lot of garbage to the debug area. But as you can see, when I add these 3 lines of code, which basically say when you're dragging something, or dragging specifically the player inventory or the inventory UI in general, we want to be dragging an action button with the name testing. So you can see here, we've got the inventory open. If I click on the area that I've allowed to drag and I drag, then we can see this action button with the word testing, and then you can see a whole bunch of debug stuff pop up here. So we're getting closer. So basically the drag and drop isn't going to be quite as useful for this inventory, although theoretically you could maybe drag an inventory item off of the screen and it drops, and you might have to pick it up again or something. But it's going to be more useful for the dual inventory here. So what I'm going to be working on right now is figuring out how to do this just for the inventory menus, and then see if I can drag and drop in between the inventory items there. So hopefully anyone else who's experiencing a similar thing in Godot, this is helpful for them. All right, so we actually don't want to do any of this on inventory UI. This was specifically for testing. Really what we're looking for is adding it to the inventory item button scenes. So if we go into inventory item button, we have some things implemented. It's very straightforward right now. You essentially initialize it with an item and the inventory key, so basically where it's located in the inventory. There's a function to update the item, which allows us to adjust which item is there, and basically set it to null if the item is dropped or moved. So really right now, this is less of an update item and more of a set null, but we can deal with that later. So what we want to do here is take these 3 functions that we created, and we don't want to do it on the actual inventory anymore. We want to do it on the inventory item button. So one other thing that came up as it relates to dragging and dropping is there are mouse events that you can configure in the editor. And so this is going to get a little tricky perhaps with programmatic elements, but elements that are statically set in the editor. There's a option under mouse called filter, and it gives you 3 options: stop, pass, and ignore. Everything by default, it seems like, is set to stop. So what that basically means is when you do some kind of mouse event over it, and anything related to drag and drop, it's going to stop on that. Here, I can just pull up the information here. But for stop, it says the control will receive the mouse movement input events and mouse button input events if clicked on through GUI input, and the control will receive the mouse entered and mouse exited signals. These events are automatically marked as handled, and they will not propagate further to other controls. This also results in blocking signals in other controls. So one of the things I was running into, if we boot the scene back up, is that I wanted to access just, oh, and we removed it now, of course, but I wanted to access just this top part of the inventory menu here so I could drag. And that wasn't working because there was a label the color rectangle, all of these things were not propagating up the chain of the mouse event. So I couldn't get back up to the inventory here and see if we were dragging and dropping here. So I had to set everything to pass and then it started working. So that's something we just need to keep in mind and figure out for these dynamic elements here, how to do it properly. So, excuse me. So now we might need to do the same for probably like this whole section. So I'll just come in, set mouse to, oh, it is already set to pass. Oh, interesting. I wonder if this was either I did this myself already or let's see, does this happen on the children by default as well? Controls whether the control will be able to receive mouse button input events through GUI input and how these events should be handled. Also controls whether the control can receive was entered and exited. I'm wondering if this affects the children. Because if it does, then we do want to maybe not set this one in particular to pass. Although pass should still receive it, right? If it's handled. Hold on. The controller will receive mouse movement input events and mouse button input events if clicked on, and the controller receive if this controller does not handle the event. Okay, so pass should be fine. What I assume is happening now, if we go to inventory item button, scene. Hey Darshan, how's it going? I think you've hopped on previously, if I'm not mistaken. Thanks for stopping by again. It's early in the morning for me, and I have a very busy day, but wanted to code a little bit and stream, so here I am. All right, so in inventory item button here, okay, that's on pass, which is fine. So it seems maybe like it's the action button that's not propagating this through. So if we go to mouse, okay, yeah, it's stopping. So we don't want that. We want it all to pass through. So if we do this, we might see it work. Yes, okay, perfect. All right, look at that. When you expect something to happen and it actually happens. That's really nice. Yeah, I haven't had too many people stop in. I don't know, like a few dozen people have probably joined and commented over the last couple weeks, but I remember you hopping on. All right, so we've got that working as expected. Now let's open up the dual inventory and just kind of see what happens here. Okay, so we did get a drop data and we were told what that was, which is pretty exciting, honestly. So I think what we need to do, okay, let's start out by just setting the item when data is dropped. So like, we basically want to say if data is item, then we can set it. So then we can say like self.set or update item with data. So that'll actually, that should theoretically work here. Let's just open up the dual inventory. Drag foo over there. Didn't seem to work. Oh, because it's an inventory item button, not an item. So actually, we don't want to return self here. What we do want to return is the item information. So we want to return self.item. And really, no, we don't care about the inventory key. So I literally think it's just that. And then if we open up this dual menu again, oh my goodness, I can't believe that works. That's awesome. I'm not really building a game at the moment. I'm more learning about game development, building out some features that I might implement in a future game. But I can just walk through what I've built so far, if that's of interest. So over the last couple weeks, I've worked on a main menu, the ability to like load and save games. So if we create a new game, we get put into this top-down view of a player that I'm controlling. And if you see this triangle polygon here, that's the outline of a flashlight. So when I turn the flashlight on, you can see the zombies that are moving around. So I basically have debug information on, so it's just a little bit easier to test. You can shoot the zombies, you can reload your weapon, you can open your inventory. Currently there aren't any items. When you hover over a zombie, you can open up a dual inventory, and the thing that I've been working on recently is being able to drag and drop between inventory menus, which I just figured out how to do. So that's been working well. And then if I zoom out here, you can see that I've built a chunking system. So as I move left and right, zombies load in and out and get saved within those chunks. And yeah, there's a whole save system to, if I click save, exit, and then continue the game again, we should see me in the same spot, and the zombies are in the same spot that they were when I exited the game. So yeah, that's kind of everything I've built so far, and right now I'm just working on the inventory, item moving, dragging and dropping, that kind of thing. Yeah. So eventually I'll make a game. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but it's nice to have this playground to like test features and learn more. Because I think diving into building a game before I like have a better grasp of what Godot offers and game development, what I am capable of doing, I think I'll just kind of create a mess. So I want to be focused on what I'm doing, if that makes sense. Okay. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I very much appreciate it. It's been fun. And the whole streaming thing has been a good time as well. It's holding me accountable and hopefully motivating other people to work on some personal projects and games and stuff. Okay, so we got the drag and drop working. Now I need to figure out how to, because these inventory item buttons are all separate from each other. I basically need to say when, let's start a new game. So I need to say when I drag from like here and drop here, I need to remove the item from the first place. And I don't know if there's anything that's triggered on the original control node that says something was dropped. Like, I don't know if those are connected. But there might be something, so I can look through the documentation for that. Godot calls this method to pass you the params data from controls get drag data results. Godot first calls can drop data to test if param data is allowed to drop at param position, where param at position is local to this control. Can drop data. Godot calls this method to test if param data from a controls get drag data can be dropped at param at position. So the one thing we want to change here is to make sure that data is item, because we don't want anything else to be able to be dragged in here. So I think this should still work theoretically. It does. That's great. So we need a way to tell the first item. Actually, maybe the way people implement this is when you start dragging it, you set the current to null, and then you can just drop it back in its position. Okay, so if we're yeah, maybe that's all it is actually. So instead of yeah, man, totally. I think there's a lot of practical use for coding outside of even like being a professional software developer. I knew a lot of people in high school who took coding classes, were very, very good at coding, and some of them went into coding and a lot of them didn't. I use coding outside of like professional software development. Like I'm working on learning how to build games right now. So that's like not related to my work specifically. I have built myself a tool to like help me do my finances every month better. And that's not related to work. I play fantasy football with my friends, and I've built myself a tool that helps me with like drafting and auction drafts. So there's lots of stuff you can do with coding that doesn't relate to your profession that I think is super helpful. So even if you want to be a doctor, like I'm sure there at some point will be, some flow you want to automate or something you want to do that, like, if you know how to code and can do that, will be, really helpful and put you a step ahead of the next person who doesn't know how to code. So yeah, absolutely. There's a reason to learn how to code, even if it's, even if you don't spend a ton of time on it, like having a little bit of knowledge goes a long way, I think. Okay, so we want the preview here to be the an inventory item button. Can I instantiate a class within itself? Like, can I do self.instantiate? That doesn't seem to be. Yeah. Can I do inventory item button dot instantiate? No. Class within itself. Get script that new? That's not what I'm looking for. Instantiate scene within itself. You're welcome. Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in learning how to code. Definitely. So this is the old Godot way of doing it. What is scene here? Load file name. Okay, maybe this feels weird, but maybe I can do inventory item button scene is preload this file. seems super odd, but this might work. Inventory item button dot initialize, and we'll pass in self dot, wait. No, initialize doesn't take anything. It's with data. Data, and then we'll say self dot item, and then this, the inventory key doesn't matter, and so we'll set the drag preview with inventory item button. So we'll see if this works. Okay, so whoa, that is huge. Why is that so big? All right, so that still drag and drops. Is this the right thing? Inventory item button? Maybe because it's within. I think it must shrink based on the parent. Okay, this is where it starts to get really weird. So the spacing I was doing with inventory UI here, like all of the items go within items margin container, but this is like, but then the actual inventory item buttons are, yeah, the anchor's full rectangle. So the sizing of this is based on the, oops, let me get rid of some of these. The sizing of inventory item button is based on the size of the parent container, which is based on the size of the other container. So like when you're instantiating inventory item button scene by itself, it doesn't have a default size. Custom minimum size of nodes bounding rectangle. If you set it to a value greater than 0, 0, the node's bounding. So I assume there's no maximum size either. Hey Legend, which language is beginner friendly syntax wise? I'd say Python is probably the simplest, and it's very similar to Godot script, GD script, which is what I'm using in this project. But for Python, it's there's very little syntax. It's really just like indent related. Is there a way to get to just like a playground? If you type in like Python playground, you can just like, that's too much. Let's say learning Python. So Python for beginners. Beginner's guide and tutorials. This is very not beginner friendly actually. Maybe Code Academy. This might be good. Let's see. Can I start this? This might be like a relatively straightforward way of learning, or more like an easier way of learning, because it'll probably walk you through different different items here. I can just post this in the chat if you're curious. It doesn't seem to let me paste. There we go. Cool, it looks like that got sent. This is probably a decent starting point for Python. But really at the end of the day, like the syntax, you just kind of get used to it. So you can start with any language, but Python is typically the like most quote unquote beginner friendly language that there is. Okay, so we need a way to make this not be huge. not expand to the entire window. I don't really want to put a like default size on it because that kind of defeats the purpose of, well, maybe I actually don't need to do full rectangle. Hold on, let me see what happens here. Okay, so I think the normal inventory still works. Oh, there we go. I think that actually, wait, did this save? Did what I did save here? I think that may have actually worked. So now if I set a custom minimum size, that's a little bit wider. So let's say like 100 pixels is the width. No, that didn't seem to do anything. So I must not be adjusting. Something seems off here. Ah, okay, well, we don't want to do that, but let me see if this... Okay, so that at least is great. All right, so we don't want a height here, but we can say like the custom width, let's say that's 400 for now, and just see what this does. Also, is the music too loud or my voice too soft or loud? There we go. Okay, so that's a little bit wider. The other option is to create a different scene for this, but I basically just want the background to be a little more obvious. And why is there a background? Okay, because it must be... No, there's a more obvious background there, so maybe... I haven't done anything with like visibility, have I? No. What if I add a color rectangle as a child here? And give it like a grayish color. Then also, let's not forget to put the mouse filter on ignore. Okay, cool. Thanks, legend. So that doesn't seem to be changing the color of this background at all. Why is the opacity so light? What if I just tried doing like a black background? It's not changing that. I feel like I'm doing something wrong here. Maybe you can't put color rectangles behind what node even is this? It's a VBox container? Does it need to be a VBox container? I think this might just want to be a panel container. Let me try updating this and hopefully, so it still extends control, which is fine. Let's see if this breaks anything. No, it doesn't. It actually does exactly what I want it to do. Now it looks a little weird because the action buttons margin, I think, might be... So I don't think I want this margin anymore here. Okay, that's more expected. And then I drag. Dragging isn't working. Why is dragging only working in the dual inventory section here? Okay, but this is closer to what I'm looking for, which is great. So let's make that a little bit lighter. And then we'll make the minimum width here just a smidge wider. So I think this should be adequate for the moment. It's possible there's no, like, it's not showing this element here because there's nowhere to like drop it. Do I have like some code down here? Maybe it's because none of the data is an item. Like, actually, I wonder now if I come here, open this up, and I try to drag empty. Oh, nothing. It doesn't work. So that's because drop data isn't an item. Oh, okay. So that's working exactly how I would expect it to. Can you get to intermediate level by 4 months of practice in coding? I guess it depends on what you define as intermediate level. I don't think there isn't really a defined like level structure in coding. There might be a little bit more of that in like school, but once you get out into the real world, there's like so many different types of coding and a lot of different things you can do. And so yeah, so I mean, it depends on what you define as intermediate, but I do think if you work hard at coding, you can get to a good place in 4 months. I would say the first however many months of coding are going to be the hardest, most likely. For me, it was kind of hard to wrap my head around what was happening. So the first several months are going to be the hardest, but I think if you can stick through that and like figure out what works for you, then you'll build a good foundation to grow on. But like, yeah, again, depends on what you define as intermediate. I think you can get to a decently fluent, probably in Python place, but like from there's so many things to learn and so many different things to do. Harsh, you had an idea you wanted to implement and you recently started Go. Can you suggest how to get a window to display something? When you say Go, do you mean... Yeah, no problem, Legend. When you say Go, do you mean like Godot, what I'm working on, or Golang? Can you suggest how to get a window to display something? Okay, so we've got a good foundation here for these elements, which is really nice. The inventories aren't saving though, which is to be expected because I don't think I'm triggering anything back out to the inventories to say that something has been added there. But let's go ahead and implement where you drag something, it removes it from your inventory, and then it can get placed back in. So when we do get drag data, oh, not Godot, you mean Golang? I actually don't know. I used Go in a previous job for about a year, and also for like some personal stuff just to mess around with it. Oh, you misread your stream title or my stream title. Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm doing Godot. I don't actually know in Golang how to do window, like any kind of window viewing stuff. But I'm sure there's a like OpenGL library within Golang that can do that relatively easily. Like if we go to Golang OpenGL, someone has used this library to interface with OpenGL. I'll just post this in the chat. Maybe that's a good starting point for you. But yeah, I'm sure there have to be ways, you know, people have, I'm sure, built like games in it and stuff, using Godot, Golang. But hopefully that's helpful. Okay. Where were we? Okay, so I think if we set... So I think... Hold on. So I don't know if this will create a reference here, but if I do var item, we're going to return item, then I say self.item equals null. Actually, we want to do update item with null, self.update item. Update item with null. If we print item, is it still valid? Oh, let's call this like a returned item. Returned item and say returned item. Okay, so let's see what this prints out. Wow. That actually works. That's so cool. Just like with a few lines of code, we have drag and drop inventory between a player and a zombie. Now, granted, it's not saving, but that's relatively simple update, I believe. Okay, so this basically allows us to, or removes current item so we can drag and drop. So I think what this also means though is that if we come back in here, if we were to pick something up and drag it off screen and let go, it just gets deleted, which is fine for now. We'll handle that, but just something to keep in mind. Okay, so we've got the, let's see, we've got that working. So now let's actually update the inventories. So we have a signal right now called emit inventory item selected. So we also want to have a signal that says like item, like emit item modified or something, where you pass in like an item, just an item, and then also the inventory key, so where it was located in the inventory. So when we, for example, update the item here, using Vim binds without relative numbers. Yeah, I like Vim. I've been using Vim for a long time. And it's been my friend. But yeah, I use it in Godot. I mean in VS Code, which works pretty well. Let's see. So in drop data, I want to also emit that signal. Because then we're updating something to be in this location. and this is emit, hold on, emit item modified, emit item modified dot emit, and self dot sorry, not self dot item data, and self dot inventory key. Then we can do the same here, except it's not data, it's actually going to be null. So I think that should be okay. So the one thing we need to, the edge case we need to realize here too is if we're so one thing, yeah, I'll get to your question just one sec, Jay. One thing we want to keep track of is when we drag an item here and like place it on another item, it's going to delete that first item. So we need a way to like swap them as well, which I'm not exactly sure how to do yet. Okay, Jay says, I have one question. I'm starting my first ever job from the 1st of January. It's an internship in backend development. Congrats. Good job on getting that. For 6 months, then full-time job. Any advice, as it's going to be a new environment for me? Are you working in person or remote? Either way, I think just go in without expectation. Go in knowing that there's going to be a lot of stuff that you don't know that you'll learn on the job, and just be willing to learn those things and, you know, listen and figure out about how things are done at the company and follow those patterns, and just try to, you know, be a fire hose and learn as much as you can. Yeah, if you're open-minded and just willing to learn and work hard, your, you know, fellow coworkers are gonna see that and respect that. And yeah, I mean, that's like the number one thing for someone earlier in their career, is just to like be open to learning as much as possible and as quickly as you can. When I've hired engineers and mentored junior engineers and interns, the thing that I like to see the most is just like a willingness to learn and like be kind, and generally people will be patient. Learn, get first, and everything else is not that hard. Yeah, I mean, get will be your friend. Yeah, no problem. Good luck with it. I'm sure you'll do great, and that's super exciting. What's the do you know what you'll be coding in? What languages? Okay, so we've got these signals now that are emitting with the drag and drop data. So if we come back into inventory UI, when we're actually creating the inventory item button scene, we're connecting this to inventory item selected. So now we want to have a function called update inventory from drag and drop, I guess we can just call it. And we'll say, we'll pass in an item and then also an inventory key. We'll return void. And we'll just hold on for a sec. So we'll say b.connect emit, what was it? Item modified, and then self.update inventory from drag and drop. Oops. Cool. So from here, we have access to the inventory itself with self.inventory. So I think we can say if we at some point we'll want a way to validate that inventory key is is actually legit. So we'll probably want to put something on the generic inventory class that allows us to check that. But for the moment, I think we say self.inventory dot so we have the generic inventory, might be add item to slot. Yeah, I think that might be all it is. Where were we? Inventory UI dot add item to slot, and then we just pass in the item and the inventory key. I think that literally might be it. So now if we, for example, drag something from the zombie to the player and then close that and open up our inventory, we have an item. And it didn't update it on the zombie side, so that's okay. So we'll go into, was it dead zombie? Wait, I feel like, hold on, shouldn't that be, hold on. I feel like that should be working. So there should be another signal in because like this is being triggered. Let's go to dual inventory real quick. So we've got this dual inventory that's being created for the zombies inventory and then also for the player inventory. So maybe I'm missing something. So when we, maybe this isn't working, emit item modified. Let's try doing that on the player as well. So, okay, we move foo over to the player. We open up player, we've got that there. If we move foo off of the player back to the zombie. Yeah, okay, so it's still on the player as well. So there is something I'm missing here. So this emit, where the item is null, doesn't seem to be respecting, or doesn't seem to be triggering an update on the inventory. So it should still theoretically work there. Oh, maybe add item to slot doesn't respect. So what's it saying here? If, oh, okay, you can only add an item to a slot if nothing is there. Wait, if items index equals null, then you can add the item. I don't think that's what I'm looking for. Because I don't care if it's null or not. I just care if the index is in the range of max items. Which I check here, so that's fine. But I don't think I really care about that. Hopefully that doesn't break anything else anywhere. I think that's the only place we're using it though. So how are you building things from scratch when you have ChatGPT? I just cannot get a hold of myself. If I have to code, I would open ChatGPT first. So, I mean, I've been using, well, first of all, I've been coding for a long time. Since long before ChatGPT existed. And I find that when I use ChatGPT, it can be helpful at the beginning for like learning something quickly, but it doesn't. Once you start getting into more complex use cases and problems, it doesn't really answer your question very well. Especially for more obscure languages and things. So like for Godot, which is an open source game engine, it's actually pretty unhelpful. Like it knows a bit more about Godot 3, which came out 5 or 6 years ago, and less about Godot 4, which came out in the last couple of years. So I've just been finding that reading the docs is more helpful, and just looking on like online for if other people have the same issue that I do. But really it's like a muscle to build up. I find when I'm more dependent on ChatGPT, my code suffers and I just get kind of lazy. And so I've been trying my best not to use it when I don't have to, but I mean, I have ChatGPT open on a different screen, like looking at some other stuff. So it's, I still use it occasionally, but not as much as I maybe used to. Okay, so we adjusted this a bit. Why isn't this working though? Wait, that worked. Hold on. Oh, wait, no, maybe that was always... Oh no, now it's working. Was that literally all it was? Was it just saying if item wasn't null? I guess, yeah, that makes sense, because I was trying to pass a null and the item wasn't null, so it wasn't going to be happy with that. So yeah, okay, that works as expected now, which is kind of exciting. And that's working for both player and zombie. So now I can even go into my normal inventory and adjust this around. Fancy, fancy, fancy. So this isn't the most practical UI because you have to scroll, but cool. All right. I feel pretty happy about that progress now. So let's commit everything I've done. Let me just see what I've changed. I think it's all just related to drag and drop. Added drag and drop to the generic inventory class. Cool. You said, yeah, you think for the newbies who are getting started with learning programming, it's good for them to make use of it for learning's sake, but not as a shortcut, just be done with the task at hand. They certainly can't be dependent on ChatGPT for all the things they would be doing. Yes, I would mostly agree with that. I think it's very helpful in learning something new and like being able to see examples of what's happening. I also think that if you're a complete newbie to programming, ChatGPT might help you get something off the ground, but you're not going to understand why any of it works. And so that's where like reading documentation, but also like taking a class or two on just like basic programming principles is probably going to help you more at the beginning than ChatGPT will. And obviously ChatGPT can explain certain programming principles, but I do think like sitting down in more of a class setting, whether that's in person or online, is probably valuable, at least at the very, very beginning of programming. There are things that I learned in school that I don't use very often, but like in particular, I took like an operating systems class that like I never really coded in C or C++, or even needed to know like about operating systems, but some of the like memory management and like nomenclature and stuff that I learned in that class has been like actually really helpful when it comes to just normal day-to-day programming, and being able to explain things and just kind of get us, understand what's going on behind the scenes. So yeah, I would agree that it's helpful, but for like very new programmers, it's probably overkill for what they need at that very moment. But yeah, it totally can get things spun up quickly. I've used it for, in particular, there's a programming language called, there's a product called Terraform, which helps with infrastructure management. And I find it to be very dense. And so I'll use ChatGPT to help out with that and just like give me how the infrastructure is kind of supposed to look in terms of code. Just because I don't like Terraform that much, but that's like one of the few areas where I'll just kind of like shortcut and use ChatGPT. But for most other things, like all of this Godot stuff in game development, I mean, I've been gaming my whole life and I'm programming for a long time, and so it's all kind of clicking and like I understand patterns and how things are kind of supposed to be. But yeah, if you came in and tried to develop a game without having any programming knowledge whatsoever, it's probably not the best place to start. But all in all, I enjoy coding. I think everyone should learn how to code. I think there's a lot of value to be had in understanding at least a little bit about coding. And with that, I've been streaming for about an hour. That's about as much time as I have this morning. I have a bunch of things to do today, so I probably won't be on this evening, probably won't be on tomorrow, but Monday, I will definitely stream again, and we can work more on expanding out the inventory, the drag and drop, maybe adding some items finally, and some other functionality, perhaps updating the inventory to be a little less horribly designed. But yeah, there's some stuff I want to work on outside of all of the UI, so it'll be exciting to start on that. Thanks everyone for hopping on. Really appreciate you guys hanging out and asking questions, and hopefully I was able to answer some of them, and looking forward to see more people coding and working. So yeah, thanks for hopping on everyone. I will see you guys